Hi, thanks for joining me. So here I'm going to talk about graphite pencils. I think they're a really wonderful beginner-friendly medium to get people into art and into drawing. So I think graphite pencils are one of the best mediums to start with if you want to get into drawing and into art. They're not too expensive to start. As long as you do it in the right way and use the right techniques, then you can really sort of have a good basis to start with. So key materials that you need is pencils and paper. So keeping in mind, you don't just use one pencil. You normally use what you would use in school would be sort of a HB pencil, and that is one of the pencils you might use. But you use a different range of pencils, and pencils come in a range of hard to soft, and that depends on whether you want to draw light or dark areas of your picture. You can start with the H's, H1, H2, and they're very hard graphite pencils, which produce very light graphite. You're not putting too much graphite down on the paper. I personally would tend to avoid those when drawing. I don't really use those. Some artists do. But when you're starting out, you want to keep things simple and make sure they've got a HB in them, a 3B, a 6B, maybe even an 8B, but up to 6B, 4Bs. These softer pencils are really good, and you can start with your HB and work your way up as you want to get darker. Having said that, I also tend to suggest getting a dark pencil. Now, there are vast amounts of pencils now which reduce shine and give you a mix of charcoal and graphite. But if you're just starting out, you want to just get a feel for drawing, then you just need some simple basic pencil. If you do want to use a dark black pencil, which will bring out your contrasts and really make your pictures pop, then use a black colouring pencil, and or you can have something like a 9B Mars Numgraph pencil, which you can buy separately. Paper. So when it comes to paper, it's quite important. A lot of artists will straight away recommend that you use a Bristol board type paper, which is a very smooth paper, and it's really good for drawing and holding graphite and getting those dark contrasts. However, it's not always suitable. It depends on what you're drawing. I use Bristol board quite a lot. I sometimes use a slightly grainier paper as well. It really depends on what you're drawing. You can use a store-bought drawing pad, a cartridge pad, if you're starting out and you just want to get a feel for it. Otherwise, move on to something like a Bristol board A4 pad. You can get them and you can have a good few sheets there to practice with. Bristol paper is a little more expensive, but it's not hugely expensive, and it can bring a little bit more sort of depth to your pictures. You'll need a sharpener, so you can buy lots of different things, lots of different sharpeners. I have bought quite a few in the past, and I've bought desk-based sharpeners. But the one I tend to use the most are these plastic, cheap sharpeners. They very often come in a pack. Sometimes you get a dull blade, so you won't use that one, but if it works, then that's all you need. I find these are very easy, so they're quick to use. You can obviously have something like this, which is a desk sharpener, and they're also very good. Erasers. So drawing in graphite and charcoal is more about putting graphite down and then moving it around and actually erasing it to give you those highlights and the shapes that you need. And once you get the key that graphite and drawing isn't just about putting drawing onto paper, it's actually about lifting it off in the right areas, you will tend to sort of improve your drawing skills dramatically once that sort of sets into your mindset. So erasers, there's a variety of different erasers. You've got kneaded erasers, some people call them putty erasers. You've got mono zero erasers, which are a little bit like a mechanical pencil. They're very thin nib on them. You can also get flat versions of those, and you can use also a normal eraser, and there's pencil erasers with cute little brushes on the end that are really very handy, and they sort of give you a little bit of movement on the nib, which is really good sometimes. And the other thing is electric erasers. They're really good to use, and they can really lift quite a lot of graphite off the paper to really give you some good highlights. So there's a variety of different erasers to use. It all depends on what you're drawing. You don't need to buy all of them. If you were just going to start out, I would certainly recommend getting a kneaded eraser and a pencil eraser of some description. So when you're drawing, you're really looking at bringing in the contrasts when you're using graphite pencils and charcoal. So if you look at any really good realistic pictures that some good artists have drawn, you will find that there's a big difference in the contrast, a big difference between the light areas and the dark areas. The whole saying is the lightest of light and the darkest of darks, and that's really what you want to be looking at. There are a lot of artists out there that do very good drawings, and you can frustratingly look at it and think if only they'd gone just a little bit darker in those areas, then it really would have made the picture pop. But when you're starting out, we can go through that and you can practice and you will start to see and get a good feel for how that works. So just quickly, if you wanted to really learn to draw and draw along with me in real-time tutorials, then I do have a Patreon account. If you wanted to check it out, the link is in the description. I produce at least 1 to 2 new tutorials every week. I deal with graphite and pastels. I go into depth with each of those. You have line arts, descriptions, and all the materials listed in those. You also have direct access to ask me any questions on the tutorials themselves or any artwork that you're currently working on. I'll always do my best to try and help you if you're stuck. And the best thing about it is you can cancel at any time, so you can dip in and out of it as you want, and you can learn at your own pace. So just to show you a couple of these techniques, we're going to draw this little drawing here of a water droplet, and it's just a very quick drawing just to show you some of the techniques and using some of these materials and how they can help you develop your art. Okay, so we're going to draw this water droplet. So I've got a HB pencil here. So this is one of the lighter pencils. And we can just use the weight of the pencil, and we can just use this pencil as a light base color or a light base of graphite, just to allow us to put something down and get a feel for this drawing. And it also allows you to get a feel for the drawing and how it's going to go. And at this stage, if you do make any errors, it's a lot easier to correct those errors or erase those errors, because you've not got a harsh dark graphite down. You're not having to press hard to get dark colors and therefore staining the paper or marking the paper. So you can just draw this in, and at this stage we're not looking at doing any details. We're just putting down our first layer of graphite just to get the shape of this water droplet. And then we can use things to blend it in. So another thing I use would be a tissue, just a bit of tissue wrapped around your finger. And in larger areas like this, it's just good to use it in circular motions and just blend that all together. And now here I'm just using a pencil eraser just to clean up the edges. And because we've only got HB pencil down lightly on here, it's very easy to do and very easy to clean up. And now we can build up our layers. So we can build up our dark layers. So I'm going to be using here, this is a 3B pencil. It's a little bit darker than the HB, sorry, and as you can see, I'm not having to press hard at all just to get that darker look to it. And we can start to bring in some of the darker areas. And again, we're not having to press hard to get this contrast, this dark contrast to the lighter area. Because it's a softer pencil, it's putting down the graphite on top of the HB graphite, so it obviously is A, darker in itself, and B, because you're putting it on top of the other graphite, it does make it darker again. And then we can blend that in, and as we see, as we blend that in, it blends nicely with the graphite underneath. And as you build graphite layers, it does get a little bit easier and a little bit smoother. to blend because you're filling the tooth of that paper. And now we can use a darker pencil again. So this is a 6B, and as again you can see it's a little bit darker again, and I'm not having to press hard to get that darkness. And so we're building up our contrast, we're building up our dark layers. So if you were to do this just with one pencil, you could do it, but obviously you're going to have to start pressing harder to get those darker layers, whereas using layers of pencils is much easier. And here I'm using a blending stump. So these are just paper blending stumps, which you can buy in packs. They're handy to use on top of paper because they do offer a little bit more control, especially when you want to get into detailed areas. And you can press a little bit harder on the tip of them in some areas and actually use them to draw with once they've got some graphite on them. So here I'm using the HB pencil again because we just want to bring in some light shadow. And then I'm using the blending stump just to blend that in and smooth it over. And now I want to make it darker again, and this is where your darker black pencils come in. So you could use a black coloured pencil, or this is a Mars Lumograph 9B pencil. You can buy these in packs, or you can buy them separately. And this will really give that great contrast on top of the darker colours again. Because it's a really dark colour, you can use that to sort of really bring that depth to your picture. And because you're putting it on top of graphite, it does go on quite smoothly. And as you can see, as we build that contrast, as we put in that really dark, it starts to lift the picture. And it's a very quick drawing of a water drop, just to show you some of these techniques used with some of these materials. But already and quite quickly, you can see that it's starting to give you that impression of a sort of a 3D impression. And that's what I say about going dark. Don't be afraid of dark colours and going dark using blacks, getting those contrasts. And then we want to bring in some highlights. So this is a kneaded eraser, and it's great for bringing in sort of larger areas of highlight. You can bring those highlights in, and we're lifting away some of that graphite. And then we can smooth the edges with our tissue. And we might want to clean these areas up. And like I said before, you can sort of draw with a blending stump a little bit because they do hold some graphite. And now I'm going to use a mechanical eraser, and this will really give a really white highlight. So we're really taking almost all of the graphite off in some of these areas just to give those high point highlights. And then we can smooth the edges with our blending stump. Handy brush on the end of this pencil eraser. And there we have our water droplets. So there we are. I hope that's been of some help for you. And like I said, I've got full real-time tutorials over on my Patreon. But if you did like this video, please give it a like, give me a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next videos.